In this section, I'll talk about the red workflow and how to use the selector to copy parameters between shots. When you work with red footage in a source grading workflow, it's important not to store local copies in Flame. Flush the cache for the sequence that will be graded before importing it to Lustre. This sequence has a mix of different resolutions, RED and ProRes files. We also have batch effects renders that are in HD resolution. The raw format transcode settings for the RED files are in the Image Transcode menu. The transcoding options are also available for ARRI RAW and Sony RAW files. When we work in the Flame collaborative workflow, Lustre uses Flame's pre-processing settings, but these can be changed in Lustre. This is because we are working with the sources. For example, you could work at a quarter resolution in Flame while editing and at full res in Lustre for grading. Remember that the source grading option has to be enabled in the browser before importing media. In the transcode menu, you have the options to define how the media will be pre-processed. The transcoding options are shot-based. Media could be cached on disk, but it's not mandatory. If your performance is good, you don't need to transfer to disk. Using proxies is a simpler option. You'll find the deburring settings under the Format tab. The RED files I'm using are 5K. In this case, half good is a sufficient format for a HD deliverable. I can choose quarter res for the proxies for fast performance. It's easy to switch between high res and proxy by clicking on the display button. It's labeled 1 for full and half for proxies. The hotkey to toggle between the two is F9. You can also change the color settings, apply a lookup table, resize the shot, and cache media. All the pre-processing settings are decoded on the fly, including the deburring and colorimetry settings. The source clip in the library is also updated with these settings. If you use resize, the deburring is used as a quality factor, and the resize the size of the image. Deburring and resize work together. Transcode versions have their own options and potentially their own transcoded media. Transcode is a pre-grading process. It's how the media should be seen by default. The settings are shot-based, but shared between the segments of a same source in the sequence and also in the library. It's great because if you reconfirm with the same sources, the transcode attributes are carried over. If a segment of a same source needs a different transcode, you can use the transcode versions to apply different settings to it. Transcoding versions are under Output. So for example, I have this shot here and this one, which are part of the same source files. Version 0 is the default. You can add as many versions as you want by clicking New. Then you modify the settings and save it. And you can load it to the segment of your choice. If you want to copy the transcode settings to a different shot or to the entire sequence, this is done in the Selector menu. You can access the Selector menu if you click on the Format tab. The Selector allows you to copy selected attributes to shots. It's very granular. You can copy specific grading attributes. In this case, use the transcode settings. Each raw format has its own settings. Here are the steps to copy attributes using the selector. I'll choose the red format and the resize parameters. Make sure you're on the shot that contains the settings you need. Select the shots you want to copy to. Right-click them, or to select the entire sequence, you can click on Select All in the selector. I'm selecting the red files in the sequence. Then press Copy in the Selector menu. The selected parameters are copied. When you're done, don't forget to click Clear All to unselect all. I'll also unselect the parameters. If you decide to transcode the red files to disk, go in the Transcode Output menu. Your media will be cached to the location specified in your project. You can transcode to DPX in 8, 10, or 12 bits, or in OpenEXR 16-bit float format. You can choose to transcode the entire scene or the selected shot. Transcoding is a background process. To transcode to disk, you press the Transcode button and it will start the background process. To display and work with the transcoded files, activate the high-res or proxy transcode. The high-res is still processing, but the proxy is already available. So a last step to finish this section. When you're ready to render, if you want to render in full res, you can select the sequence and copy only the debayering full setting. So this will be under the selector. So I'll set the high res to full on the current shot and copy this setting to the other shots. The image resolution will be determined by the debayering settings you work with, and a soft resize will be applied in Flame.